Hey, good evening, good evening, good evening, everybody, man. I hope everybody doing well. And I hope everybody's having a good time. And I'm just excited again to be back for another episode of the Conversation 9-8. And I look forward to the discussion tonight. Um, uh, Almost, just as usual. I definitely look forward to it. So just want to, welcome everybody in this place, man. Um, and I hope you guys have a great time tonight. Um, Looking forward to the conversation. And I'm just taking 2024 one day at a time. Definitely excited about what's happening and what's going on, and uh, you know besides that, man, things are going good for me. No complaints, and I hope all is well with you all. But again, man, let me know where you're tuning in from. And it's an interactive show. So feel free to comment, man. I look forward to interacting with the comments, and I'm just excited about tonight because tonight episode, things gonna talk on some topics that I think a lot of us deal with, and I'm looking forward to just kind of deep diving into it. I'm sharing this with a few people. Once I get done with that, definitely gonna get right into the conversation. Won't be before you guys long tonight. But again, man, um, you know, I'm just excited about the show. Really excited about the show. And one thing I was thinking, I was talking to my mama today, um, being obedient. Um, First of all, what's going on, Erica? How you doing? Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you. But just being obedient. I've been doing this show since pretty much every week since September 2001. And one thing that I do appreciate is I appreciate just the consistency of just being obedient and God pouring into me, giving me things to talk about, me learning about myself, and uh, that's what I get into. So, with all that said and done, I'm about to go ahead on and get right into the subject tonight. I didn't talk enough, so it's time to go ahead and get at it. But tonight show, good evening, Miss Robinson. How you doing? Good evening to you. Good evening to you. But we're gonna get right into it. Um, so tonight's show, we're gonna talk about just because you acknowledge doing something doesn't mean you've taken ownership of it. And I say that because a lot of times, there people are quick to acknowledge that they have done something to you, especially a wrongdoing. People will acknowledge that they've done something to you. They will acknowledge that, hey, look, hey, I acknowledge I did that to you, right? But just because you acknowledge it does not automatically mean that you have taken ownership of it. And a lot of times with that, it's almost like disrespectful in an attempt to acknowledge that I did something to you. I apologize, but my action don't change. Taking ownership of it is taking full ownership and acknowledging the fact that, hey, I did something to you, and I acknowledge what I did to you and acknowledge the impact of it. So, like I said before, just because you acknowledge doing something, that doesn't mean that you're taking ownership of it. And it's so imperative that we take full ownership of it because that's where healing comes from. That's where healing come from. If we sit down and think about it, that is where a lot of the healing come from. And you know, a lot of relationships, parent and child, spouse, significant others, a lot of relationships are eroded simply because people acknowledge what they do, but they don't take ownership of what they do. And that's almost, and I find that to be offensive, and that can be very offensive, especially when you're talking about taking ownership. Just saying, "Oh, I can acknowledge that I did something to you." Yeah, boom. But just because I acknowledge it, does that mean that I care about what that impacted you? And I think when we take ownership of it, taking ownership shows that side that we care about or we are concerned about the impact of it, right? And the impact of what I did and how that impacted you. Because a lot of people, when they sit down and look at it, they don't care about how it impact you because they only thinking about themselves. And that's why a lot of people they acknowledge that they did you wrong, but they would never take full ownership of it. And one of the reasons why they won't take full ownership of it is because is because people won't take full ownership of many people won't take full ownership of the things that they've done to you because they're selfish. They selfish and they only look at it and they got an ego. And their ego and their selfishness is rooted in pride to the point to where they just feel like they don't want to take accountability for their actions. So that's why they don't take ownership of it. See, taking ownership is just taking accountability for what you've done. A lot of times things will be mended if you just somebody just simply take ownership. Hey man, I did you wrong. I apologize for that. Hey, I was wrong with that. I was wrong for what I did. And I'm not putting that on anybody else. That 100% on me. So by me being wrong, what I'm doing is I'm taking ownership of my behavior. I'm taking ownership of the things I did. I take ownership of it. So now by me taking ownership, I'm willing to be attentive and be sensitive to the things that caused the hurt in the first place. And the reality is a lot of us many people just don't care, and one of the things about it, people don't realize just how much you can take somebody for granted. And by you taking people for granted, that will cause you to get self-righteous to the point to where you feel like you come to the point to where you feel like, hey, I acknowledge that I did you wrong. But then because of your self-righteousness, it will hinder you from taking ownership of it. And we'll sit around and spend so much time, energy, and effort, and then we will try to spin it to play the role of the victim. And the reason why we try to spin it to play the role of a victim, because we're trying to justify that the very thing that we did wrong, even though we know we did wrong, even though we acknowledge it, but we refuse to take ownership of it because we refuse to take accountability for our actions. And so many people do that, and we destroy relationships. That's why a lot of parents and child's relationships are destroyed. That's why a lot of marriages are destroyed. That's why a lot of relationships are destroyed because of that factor. Because of that factor. We don't want to take time to just acknowledge that, hey, look, I did you wrong. And this one thing about it. One thing about it with that is, if we really be honest with ourselves, we know when we do people wrong. Now, sometimes we may not know that we have done wrong by people, but in the aspect of knowing it to the point of acknowledging, we know when we do people wrong. The problem is with a lot of us, we get to the place of where we don't respect the person enough to take ownership of what we did and put the work in to mend that hurt. And it can be something simple. It can be something simple. And a lot of times you look at it from, a lot of people stop. You got to stop being scared of taking ownership of what you may have done to somebody, and stop taking it personal. Some things we do wrong by people that we didn't even intend to do wrong. But if they bring it to us and we can be mature enough to acknowledge it, what ends up happening then? We acknowledge that, right? And I can say, hey, I acknowledge I did that. I did you wrong on that one. I take ownership, and that wasn't my intent, but I'm taking ownership of it, and I'm going to be cognitive of what I do later. Be cognitive. What's going on, Uncle? Uncle Charles, how you doing? Appreciate it. Hey, Taylor, how you doing? Taylor Jones in the building. She said, right, my Monday, Tuesday, man. Got it. Miss Joyce Jones, good evening. Good evening to you. Hello. And Mama said, sometimes it's the pride. That is so true. That right there is so true. One thing we just have to be careful. We have to be careful, big time. All right. We all have an ego, and we all can easily fall into having pride and being so private to the point to where we don't want to acknowledge, or we refuse to acknowledge what we do or how what we do impact others, right? But we are responsible for managing that. We are responsible for that. We can blame everybody else. We can try to talk to everybody else. We can try to say it and put it on other people. At the end of the day, that pride is you. And just how simple it is. Like, think about it. We got broken relationships for years for parents. And I'm using the parents and kids because that's a dynamic, or marriages. We have broken relationships all because somebody don't want to take ownership of what they do. And you know what you're doing hurting, but you don't care because selfishness come in. And when selfishness come in, and we allow selfishness to come in, that will erode and destroy relationship like nothing other. Nothing other. And the reality is we have to take full ownership. Now, one thing about it, I know it's hard for some people, but you may ask the questions, what does it look like, right? Taking full ownership of your actions, right, is not that much different than acknowledging it. Acknowledging what you did is the first step, right? But taking ownership is the second step, in which you would put forth the effort to figure out what was done wrong and start working towards, deliberately working towards changing the behavior or changing the perspective or your mindset. Because a lot of times we refuse to change because we don't want to change our mindset. And when we change our mindset towards something, what we'll realize is what is really being asked of us is nothing that's serious or that much that we have to change. It be the small things. But just because we're so prideful, we don't want to acknowledge it. It be the small things. I'm talking about it be the small things. But we become so prideful where we stand on business while at the same time destroying the very relationship that's supposed to be important to us. That's supposed to be. What's up, Flo? What's going on? He said it all starts with personal accountability. Hey, you hit something on that one. You hit it on the head on that one. Because that's a very true statement. People have a problem with taking ownership because they don't want to be held accountable personally. You know, they want the freedom to make the choices, but they don't want the accountability that comes with, or the responsibility that comes with the decision that's made. And you just have to be accountable. Why we make that so hard? You know, I say this saying all the time. We make rocket science out of a coloring book on things that are so simple. So simple, a personal accountability. Hey, I did wrong. Got it. You know, but a lot of that comes from, you know, never really being held accountable, or we find ourselves not being able to cohabitate with different people and it always somebody else. No, that really what it boils down to is you don't want to be accountable. You want the freedom to do whatever you want, and you want your environment to be around to enable that. But that is not the right way to live. That's really sad. And it really says a lot about you and how scary you are as a person, because you hate personal accountability. You hate personal accountability. And you know, it is what it is. And that's just what it boils down to. You can get mad at that all you want to, but that right there, what it boils down to. Seriously. And you know, like if we really be honest, if we sit down and be honest, right? There have been a lot of people that have been hurt by the people closest to us, all because they refuse to take ownership of their actions and their behaviors towards us. They refuse to take ownership. You got some people that have I call the gall or the audacity, right, to take people for granted, do people wrong, and then turn around and act as if, you know, what they have done to them or their behavior towards them is justified. And what it really boils down to is they don't want to be accountable. So they'll acknowledge that I did something to you, but I'm not going to take ownership. And that's just like me saying, hey, I'm sorry that you was offended. Or I'm sorry that you. That's a sign of somebody that don't want to be accountable. You know, y'all know people like that. You know people, and we all seen them. We all seen them, and we all know those people, right? We got a lot of people that, you know, the first thing they come up talking about them apologizing, it's so hard for them to apologize. And when they struggle with apologizing or admitting that they wrong, that says a lot about who they are as people. And they will sit there and spend all this time, energy, and effort trying to convince themselves that their position is right. Nobody is always right. Nobody has it all together, right? And if you have a problem with apologizing, if you have a problem with admitting that you're wrong, if you have a problem with taking ownership of your behavior when it hurts somebody, that says a lot about who you are as a person. And it shows that you are someone that has a lot of insecurities. And you're trying to hide behind those insecurities by portraying to everybody else that you are strong. But in reality, you're just a scared little boy or girl that refuse to take ownership because you feel if you take ownership, you will be exposed. You will be exposed. And Anthony Walker said, no one is never going to admit to their wrongdoings. And that takes some maturity. That takes some maturity. How you doing, Miss Geraldine? How you doing? But that takes some maturity, and you have to want that for yourself. You know, at the end of the day, we have to sit down and think about it. And this is me at that, right? At the end of the day, what it boils down to how you want to live your life as a person. And I know a lot of people, we base a lot of things based off of what somebody else would do or won't do. But the reality is, man, it boils down to your decision on how you're going to choose to live your life. For me, myself, I choose to live a life that honors God in a way that it aligns to the teachings and the scriptures of the Bible. And there are some things by me applying those words. You know, there's a lot of times I have to do things that I don't want to do. You know, there's a lot of times that I've had to go against my natural inclinations to do certain things, right? But with that, I've learned by doing that, I've received a lot of peace, and God has shown himself strong by doing those things and by acknowledging certain things and by surrendering certain things. And I say all that to say this, right? When you get to a space to say you take ownership, you will find that you have more peace in your life. You'll find you have more peace in your life. You will definitely find that peace, that Philippians 4:7 peace, that peace that surpasses all understanding. You know, like that's why I appreciate and I understand, because it doesn't make sense sometimes. And a lot of times when I talk about, and this is when I say just because you acknowledge doing something doesn't mean you've taken ownership, right? You know, and that goes back to, you know, owning it, like dominating your battle space. There's some things that I've ran. There's some areas in my life, you know, that I mean, this is the God honest truth. This ain't on anybody else. This is 100% me. You know, there's some areas in my life that I have ran away from, and I refuse accountability of them because of insecurities. Because those areas I'm not strong in. The areas that I'm strong in, boom, I run and hit those face forward. That's not a problem. But those other areas in my life where, you know, I feel you can get to a space where you become insecure, or you become ashamed because you may need help with something that, you know, you may feel like other people would judge you, or feel like, you know, that they're judging you because you should have known this, or they felt like you should have known this, that, and the third. No, there are areas in my life where I struggle with. But there's other areas that I'm strong with. And I bring that up because we have to be to a space to where we can acknowledge where we at. And that's why we need other people, because somebody else can help us along the way. Somebody else can really help us. Flo said this short story. I cut off my nephew over him asking me for $20 because he told me he would pay me back, as opposed to asking for it and me just giving it to him. I cut him out of more than 20 years of me pouring into him over $20. I called him and apologized. We're building back up. Gotcha. But also too, and I'm glad you shared that, Flo, but I'm gonna say this. I got a similar story. Got a family member, and I just say I have a family member at one time reached out and got upset at me because, you know, I didn't respond like I usually did, and got upset or whatever. And a couple months went by, and we ended up seeing each other in person. And that individual came up to me and was like, "Hey, you know, hey, I just want to apologize, but you know, now I see everything. I understand this, that, and the third, and you know, that make it right. But I would tell you, Flo, you know, you being that person and leaning forward and mending that, it goes a long way. Listen, and this is a good thing, right? This is a good thing, very good thing. You are never too prideful. Never be too prideful. Never be too strong will. Never be too just standing on business to the point to where you can't humble yourself to go make things right. Just go make things right. Just to say, hey, I did something wrong. And I would tell you, there's years of hurt that can be erased and mended if we simply say, get the courage to go to somebody and say, hey, man, I was wrong for that. I apologize. I was wrong. And make that phone call. Call them up. FaceTime them. When you see them in person, apologize. And you will see the difference, because you holding a grudge or you doing all of that, you just poisoning yourself. It ain't doing nothing to the other person. It's hurting you more than it's hurting that other person. It's hurting you more than it's hurting that other person. You know, I can remember certain things, and I thank God for all of these experiences. I can remember, man, it was a while ago, but I can remember this, and it was crazy, right? I remember I was deployed to Iraq in 2003, and being in the military, there was some things going on. I was a section leader. I was an E5 sergeant, and there was some favoritism that was going on with some other NCOs in my section, and it was upsetting me to the point where I began to have an issue with one of the NCOs that was receiving the favoritism. And I began to harbor some bad feelings on the inside towards that NCO, to the point where I remember the Holy Spirit spoke to me and was like, Robert, why are you mad at him? He ain't had nothing to do with it. And I remember I went to that individual and I apologized to that individual for harboring wrong feelings towards him. And in my apology towards him, he looked at me like, man, what you talking about? But I can remember learning in that space that I freed myself from what I was harboring, and it set me free. It set me free. And I learned in that, like, a lot of times we can be mad at other people about things that they ain't had nothing to do with, right? And then we'll sit around and hold that, and it impacts us, and they ain't got nothing to do with them. He didn't even know I had an issue. But my issue wasn't with him. My issue was with the other NCO that was showing favoritism. You know, but at the end of the day, because I did all of that, some other things, God opened up doors for me, and he showed me favor in those situations. And I can stand on this today and acknowledge that, you know, God has always been faithful, even in the times where I felt like he wasn't there, even in the times where I wanted to give up, even in the times where I just felt like I was abandoning and not have anything. God has shown himself strong. So, hey, man, I hope you guys enjoyed tonight, man. I appreciate you rocking with me. It means the world to me. I definitely appreciate it. Make sure that you guys go check me out on these platforms. Go to YouTube, man. Hey, go to YouTube, like and subscribe this on YouTube at The Conversation 98. The Conversation 98 on Instagram, at 98 Conversation on Twitter, X, whatever they call it now. The Conversation 98 on here on Facebook, and at The Conversation _98 on TikTok. Hey, you guys have a great and wonderful evening. I really appreciate you all. You guys mean the world to me. And hey, if you got something and you've been holding something strong, and you struggle with just acknowledging it, like, now is the time. Now is the time not to just acknowledge it, but to take ownership of it. You guys have a great evening. Look forward to seeing you guys soon. God bless.